Greetings, kindred. We're going to continue our study of the book of Ezekiel, and today we're going to be covering chapter 1, verses 17 through 28. This study was written by Pastor Lancelot Knight of the former King's Chapel over 23 years ago. But I think you'll find the prophecies in this book are relevant for today because I really do think we're living in the end times. Too many prophecies are coming to pass so that we might actually see the return of Christ. Won't that be exciting? Yep, this is the time that all the disciples and apostles wanted to live in, and yet we're privileged enough to be living in this time. How exciting. So fasten your seat belts and let's get started. Some people don't think that there are any things in the spiritual dimension so that when you die and go to heaven, assuming you've accumulated enough points by going to church regularly and making sufficient monetary contributions to be in good standing on the church roster, you really go sit on some cloud and play a harp and sing holy, holy, holy all day long. Wait a minute, harps are things. How do they reconcile that? Note, I'm not knocking going to church or giving, but for some, that's about all their Christianity consists of, and they ignore His Word. Then, too, many folks tell their kids that Santa Claus travels around the world in his sleigh pulled by his cherubims, the reindeer led by Rudolph, and they go forth as a flash carrying He who brings gifts and good tidings to the world from out of the north. Ho, ho, ho! Not so. Okay, I want to just stop here for a minute because did you know that Santa is an anagram for the word Satan? Let that sink in. It makes you wonder if someone isn't sort of mocking Ezekiel chapter 1, doesn't it? What do the Zun at the throne of Yahweh say? Revelation 4:8, and the four beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Yahweh Elohim Almighty, which was and is to come. Would Satan mock Yahweh and His mode of transportation? Do you think our Father looks like the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent fat boy dressed in a red and white? White robes are the dress of the saints and their Christ. Revelation 19:13 says concerning the description of Christ, and He was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and His name is called the Word of Elohim. And how about Satan's white beard and hair? Revelation 1:14 says, His head and His hairs were white like wool, white as snow, and His eyes were as a flame of fire. Oh, that was Christ's description, not Santa's. Anyway, here's another question to consider. What have you always been taught happened to Elijah, the great prophet? I don't know about you, but I was taught that he got sucked up in the middle of a giant whirlwind. This belief was confirmed when I saw the Hollywood movie The Wizard of Oz, and Dorothy and Toto made the trip by tornado to Munchkin Land. But is that really what happened to Elijah? Let's check it out. 2 Kings 2, verse 1. And it came to pass when Yahweh would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, and that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. The word whirlwind is the exact same Hebrew word car that Ezekiel saw coming to him from out of the north. You can read the entire account in 2 Kings, so let's skip to verse 9. And it came to pass when they were gone over that Elijah said unto Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee, before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. 10. And he said, Thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. Elisha will see Elijah taken up in a whirlwind. 11. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Look up the word chariot in Strong's Concordance. It is Rechab, Hebrews 7393. From Hebrews 7392, Rechab, a vehicle. By implication, a team. By extensive cavalry. By analogy, a rider, i.e., the upper millstone. Chariot, upper millstone, multitude, from the margin, wagon. This was not bad weather. It was the same highly polished bronze fiery vehicle that Ezekiel describes in more detail. This one landed between Elijah and Elisha, and Elijah was taken on board, and up he went into the heavens. Yes, he flew bye-bye. Someone is going to write and ask, are you saying that Elijah was taken up in a UFO, an unidentified flying object? The answer is no, he was taken up in an IFO, an identified flying object, for Ezekiel identified them for us again. Again, no one until the 20th century could have even asked that question, much less have understood it. Think about it. Verse 12, and Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel. How would Elisha have known it was the chariot of Israel unless he saw the emblems of Israel, i.e., the faces of the lion, the man, the ox, and the eagle? If you saw a plane land with the American eagle on it, you would know that it was a United States plane, right? Verse 12 continued, and the horsemen thereof. Here's the word for horseman. Parash, Hebrews 6571 from Hebrews 6567, parash, a steel as stretched out to a vehicle, not single nor for mounting, compare Hebrew 5483. Also by implication, a driver in a chariot, collective cavalry, horsemen. Yet Elisha saw the same chariot drivers that Ezekiel saw. The words aviation pilots and astronauts didn't exist. Isn't this fascinating? Well, guess what? You may get your chance to see some vehicles like these real soon. We'll talk about that later in this book of Ezekiel. Just know for now that they do exist. Let's return to Ezekiel and finish reading his description of these chariots of fire. Ezekiel 1, verse 18. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them 4. And that's the number 4, F-O-U-R. The word dreadful is better translated as awesome for us today. These circular vehicles had windows around them that Ezekiel could see into, and there were living creatures inside. Verse 19, and when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. This is no big deal to us. When the plane takes off, all those we see through the portholes go up too. But imagine Ezekiel seeing this 2,500 years ago. How awesome indeed it must have been. It isn't written, but I'll bet it knocked his socks off. Don't you just love figures of speech? Ezekiel 1:20. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go. And the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. The living creature, the Zun, was in the vehicle, and Ezekiel could see him. Ezekiel 1:21. Then those went, these, when those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them. For the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. He just couldn't get over this, could he? Shiny spectrum metal wheels with living beings inside that just take off into the sky with the beings inside and whiz around and land at will. Unbelievable to him. 22. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of the terrible crystals stretched forth over their heads above. Okay, try these translations. Quote, above the heads of the living creatures was, as it were, a vault glittering like a sheet of ice, awe-inspiring, stretched over their heads above them. That's from the NEB version. Or, the sky spreading out above them looked as though it were made of crystal. It was inexpressibly beautiful. That's from the Living Bible. Verse 23. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Every one had two which covered on this side, and every one had two which covered on that side, their bodies. And under the vault their wings were level, each one pair touching the next creature, and one pair covering its body. That's the Moffat translation. Okay, Ezekiel 1:24. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of a host. When they stood, they let down their wings. Okay, and they flew. As they flew, their wings roared like waves against the shore, or like the voice of Yahweh, or like the shouting of a mighty army. When they stopped, they let down their wings. That's from the Living Bible. These verses are pretty much self-explanatory when you know what is being described. They let down their wings when they stood. Sure, they lowered their landing gear. Only our generation of these end times can really understand it. Even Ben Franklin and company would be unable to grasp this because they never saw close encounters of the third kind. Verse 25. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let down their wings. Wait until we read whose voice this is. Okay, let me try that again. Wait until we read whose voice this is. Verse 26. And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. There was a throne like a sapphire stone, and someone was sitting on it. Ezekiel 27. And I saw the color of amber as the appearance of fire round about within it, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire, and it had a brightness round about. Okay, from his waist up, he seemed to be all glowing bronze, dazzling fire, and from his waist down, he seemed to be entirely flame, and there was a glowing halo like a rainbow all around him. That's from the Living Bible. These same descriptions can be read in Revelation 1 and Revelation 4. Okay, verse 28. And the appearance of the bow, that is the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of Yahweh. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face and heard a voice of one that spake. The rainbow that surrounds the throne of Yahweh is the Shekinah glory, that sparkling prism radiance that is present everywhere he goes. John saw it when he was taken to the throne in heaven, and Ezekiel saw it when the heavenly throne was brought to him. Here's John's matching account. Revelation 4, verse 2. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. Verse 3. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. So there you have it. The creator of the universe has decided to personally come down from heaven in his vehicle. Israel 1 to speak to the priest and the prophet Ezekiel. What an hour and a privilege for Ezekiel. Of course, he is flat on his face right now, probably shaken in his boots, without his socks, which would have been blown off. We hate to leave him that way until our next study, but we are out of time. Now, this is extremely important, even as it would be this final generation of the last days that Yahweh would pour out his Spirit upon to be able to see or understand the vision that Ezekiel saw. So too it is for this last generation to understand what Yahweh is about to tell Ezekiel. Why? Because it was given to him for this generation, because it applies to this final generation. I keep repeating over and over, we live in the most exciting times in history of mankind, bar none. Sure, Ezekiel got to see these vehicles, and he did a great and magnificent job of describing them for us. And just as stunning a sight as it was for Ezekiel, get ready, for we will get to see these things, including the vehicles, in the very near future that will be even more spectacular. We will learn tomorrow in our next study. Wow. Okay, that concludes this study. I've got some reports that some people who may have autoplay on Rumble might get some unseemly type videos. Those videos are not part of this video. This video is ending right now. So if you're on autoplay, just be warned that you might get some unseemly material. Okay, well, I'll see you all next time. Yahweh bless.